I don't believe the polls because we've never had this much support. They have a boat thing. They have 5,000 boats. They have thousands of trucks all over the country. You had the same polls. They were worse the last time. I had one time. I was 9 down in 9 different states, and I won all of them. I was in 9 states I was down. Big ones. I won every one of them.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. Whether it's a side effect of the steroids he's taking as part of his coronavirus treatment or something else, Donald Trump seems to be drifting further away from reality today as his re-election chances appear to be slipping away. An NBC News average of national polls gives Joe Biden a 10-point lead over Donald Trump. And just this week, 3 polls showed Trump down by anywhere from 12 to 16 points. And the Real Clear Politics average of all the polls in key battleground states shows Joe Biden leading in, all of them. Among them, Arizona, where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are campaigning together in Phoenix this hour and will launch their Soul of the Nation bus tour. This comes as Financial Times columnist Edward Luce warned today that if the race stays focused on the pandemic, Donald Trump is facing a blowout. Quote, "Don't be afraid of COVID" was Donald Trump's message on leaving the hospital this week. To say he was tempting fate would be an understatement. The president could not know where the disease would leave him, but he ought to know that the only way he could win re-election is by focusing on anything but the pandemic. Luce went on to write, quote, "He wants Americans to be afraid of something that does not seem particularly lethal, the radical left, yet be unafraid of a disease that has so far claimed 212,000 American lives. It does not feel like a winning strategy." And Republicans seem to be well aware of that fact, as Bob Costa reports for the Washington Post. Facing a political reckoning as Trump's support plummets and a possible blue tsunami looms, it is now conservatives and Trump allies who are showing flashes of discomfort with the president straining to stay in the good graces of his core voters without being wholly defined by an erratic incumbent. Quote, "There are cracks and fissures all over the ice," said Republican consultant and Trump critic Rick Tyler in that piece. Donald Trump's sinking political fortunes and Republicans starting to scramble for the exits is where we start this hour with some of our favorite reporters in France. The aforementioned Bob Costa, national political reporter for the Washington Post and moderator of PBS Washington Week, is here. Also with us, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University and the Griot contributor Jason Johnson, and NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbell is here. Bob Costa, your piece is remarkable. I read it as soon as it popped online last night. You are one of the best sourced people with your finger on the sort of sense of what hasn't happened in 4 years. It didn't even happen 4 years ago this week. There was a little bit of a freak out when Access Hollywood tape came out. Reince Priebus, I think, claimed the freak out mantle, started talking about taking Trump off the ticket. They're not talking about that now, but there is a serious spoken conversation going on in Republican circles about life after Trump.
It's very muted, Nicole, and I appreciate your generous comments, but it's happening. It's something that's beginning to crack across the ice in the Republican Party, as Rick Tyler said. What you're seeing is senators like John Cornyn in Texas or Martha McSally in Arizona, or House members uneasy about the president's negotiating style on the stimulus. They're all starting to speak out in their own way on debate stages and elsewhere, and carving out their own political space, knowing they can't do too much because they need the president's core voters. They need the president's political capital to a point. But they do see in all the polling a possible blue tsunami on the horizon.
Jason, let me put up one of the senators that Bob Costa mentioned. This is McSally dodging a question, a simple question. You don't even prep for questions like this in debate prep. Maybe these days you do. Are you proud of your support for Donald Trump? Here's how she answered.
The question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President
Trump? Putting legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support for President Trump. I'm proud to be fighting
for Arizona.
Jason Johnson, it sounds like she doesn't want to be tweeted at or perhaps plotted to be kidnapped, but she also doesn't want to create that moment of tape in her last 27 days where she says, I'm proud of my support for Donald Trump.
It's like if you got a 5-year-old and it's like, did you eat the cookie? Don't know about cookie. Did you eat the cookie? Haven't seen cookie. Cookie's right there. Either you grabbed the cookie or you didn't. Either you like Donald Trump or you don't. And the fact that Martha McSally, who has tied herself, like the front mast of a ship, who has tied herself to Donald Trump at only 27 days away, is now saying she couldn't even say his name in the answer. That is a sign of how dangerous and toxic the Trump brand has become. I've said all along, Nicole, that Trumpism only works for Trump, right? That sort of combination of white nationalism and sexism and misogyny, that works. Yeah, it works for him, but it didn't work for Greetings in Missouri, right? It didn't work when you were running for governor in Virginia. And so that's what Sally and a lot of these Republicans are facing. I really thought the article was great, but the other thing is this. It also has to do with the fact that the money is starting to dry up. I mean, people don't want to give to what they think might be the last dam against a blue wave. And that's one of the other challenges Republicans are facing. The money is drying up and people are getting nervous, and we're only a couple of weeks away, and millions of Americans, over 3 million Americans, have already voted.
Heidi, I have always felt like Trump's political act is not transferable. He can't lay his hands on people and do them good. He can lay his hands on people or his tweeting fingers on people and do them a lot of harm. But I think, to Jason's point, that was always the case. And let me put up all of the Senate Republicans. So in Arizona, McSally is trailing by 7 points. In Colorado, Cory Gardner, the Republican there, trailing by 7. In North Carolina, Tom Tillis trailing by 5. In Iowa, Joni Ernst is behind her opponent by 5 points. In Maine, Susan Collins is trailing by 4 points. South Carolina, Lindsey Graham is tied. Lindsey Graham in a tied race with Democrat Jamie Harrison. In Montana, Steve Daines is leading by 1 point. In Montana, in Georgia, Perdue leads by 3 and Dan Sullivan is up by 4. I had this weird feeling in the end of the summer that it was more likely that Trump wins and Mitch McConnell loses his majority than the opposite. It seems that, and again, we should say this every single day, polls are a snapshot. This is the race today. 4 years ago, this was the week that the Russians hacked into emails and started their very public campaign to harm Hillary Clinton's candidacy. So anything can happen. But right now, the Republican majority looks as imperiled as Trump's presidency.
And we just, as you know, cannot make the same types of assumptions that we've made in previous elections, like you said, where Trump wins in the Senate majority is lost. That is now one and the same if you look at some of the assumptions that are being made by political strategists today, and that in 2016, every single state that voted a certain way in the presidential, there was strong coattails, and that is the way that the Senate seat went. That is why we're at a point now where some of the best political strategists and pollsters are saying that there's a strong chance that Democrats will expand their majority in the House, and they're in striking range in the Senate as well. And to that chart that you just put up, you really paused on Lindsey Graham, because I think that was the seminal moment for all of us, watching Lindsey Graham, of all people, who looked like he was just going to glide to re-election just months ago on Fox News, actually begging for money, because by every metric in this race, Republicans are struggling in the polls. They're struggling in the money race. If you look at cash on hand, just to throw some numbers out at you, in the House, the average for Democrats is $4 million, compared to Republicans, 414,000. So big disparities there. And unless something dramatic happens, it does seem like the combination of the debate plus the president's COVID diagnosis is really having an effect on some of these core groups that had already been moving away from him, like voters who frankly don't like either candidate, like voters who voted for third-party candidates. Now polls showing all of those groups moving towards Biden, Nicole.
You know, Bob Costa, I want to show you what Nancy Pelosi had to say about the 25th Amendment, because it's a small circle of people who've actually spoken out loud about the 25th Amendment since Trump's been there. It's reported that Rod Rosenstein at one point whipped votes for the 25th Amendment, something he later said was sarcasm. Anonymous talked about the 25th Amendment. And we now have Nancy Pelosi today saying she'll have more to say about it tomorrow. But I want to put a political theory in front of you and ask you to put these two sort of thoughts together. After the debate performance, a Trump advisor said to me that they are one political event away from the bottom dropping out. That the missed opportunity about the debate is that by not allowing Biden to talk, there wasn't an opportunity for Biden to give them a moment that they could then, if you look at pattern, distort and circulate and make something of. But that the feeling, the political reality pre-Trump's diagnosis and then handling of the diagnosis, because I think the handling of the diagnosis was more damaging to him than the diagnosis itself. That event seems, if you look at the polls, to have been this diagnosis and the way the White House handled it. But I want to play Pelosi's sound and then talk about all of it on the other side.
Do you think it's time to invoke the 25th Amendment?
I'll talk to you about that tomorrow. I'll talk to you about it tomorrow. I'm not talking about it today except to tell you, if you want to talk about that, we'll see you tomorrow. But you take me back to my point. Mr. President, when was the last time you had a negative test before you tested positive? Why is the White House not telling the country that important fact about how this made a hot spot of the White House?
Bob Costa, two parts. One, what does she have on the 25th Amendment for us tomorrow? And two, is it possible that the handling of his diagnosis and illness was so bad that it could be that second event that did real political damage to him?
To your first point, Nicole, in my story today, a senior Republican on background uses the same phrase, bottomed out, when it comes to his own view of the Republican Party. And this is someone who works with President Trump, and they declined to be named because they wanted to be frank. And they said everyone's in survival mode. And the question is, when does this all bottom out? And to the 25th Amendment point, this is a growing issue among Democrats in recent weeks. You listen to Senator Bernie Sanders, his major address in recent days, to Speaker Pelosi talking about mentioning it tomorrow at a news conference. Democrats are worried not only about the president's conduct now, but post-election, should he be defeated. And that's why constitutional issues like the 25th Amendment are being brought up. But the issue for Democrats as they talk about these kind of issues is, where are the Republicans? Who will speak up? Will sources like my own, always on background, it seems, during the Trump era, finally change their tune and speak on record?
Look, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I want to put out a theory for why some of these folks speak on background, because the ones that know the most are the ones who have tied themselves to Trump the most closely and the ones who want to benefit in some way from that association. I mean, if we enter into this territory, Bob Costa, where the 25th Amendment is a thing, I mean, she sounded like she was going to have something to say about the 25th Amendment tomorrow. It's an extraordinary thing to just inject into the conversation at this point.
It is, and based on my own understanding of the upper echelon of the Republican Party, it's very hard to see, even if President Trump defies more norms post-election, should he be defeated, if it would actually be executed by the Trump administration's cabinet and Vice President Pence. These are people who are loyalists to President Trump. And whether they go to that extreme constitutionally remains to be seen. I haven't seen any type of appetite in that group at this point.
You know, Jason Johnson, I want to give maybe a counter set of data points, though. The president's behavior is so concerning that all the leaks are coming from inside the White House. I mean, it is a lot of reporters on the White House beat that are writing about the really ominous scenes inside the White House. So it would, again, appear to be not the president getting sick. I don't think anyone wants the president to have anything other than a recovery. I think his critics would like him to be in good health for his own concession, if that's what they're rooting for. But this idea that the way they've handled this has sown So much concern among the kinds of folks that Bob Costa talks to, among those Senate candidates who are almost all behind their Democratic opponents. What do you think the sort of, we always fail to widen the lens broad enough for what is possible, but what do you think Pelosi is hinting at with the 25th Amendment?
You know, I think that what she's suggesting is, for the first time, doing something lots of people have been wanting Democrats to do, right? We want them to actually say what they want to do about the courts. We want them to actually say what their plan would be if Trump refuses to acknowledge that he's lost. She may actually, for the first time, lay out an actual plan. Like, look, this is how we would apply the 20th Amendment. These are the reasons why we think it's applicable. These are the people who we would be making the pitch to in order to apply it, to have him removed or say that he's incapable of doing the job. She may actually be tipping the hand that a lot of us have been warning if the Democrats were willing to show about what to do about this president. But Nicole, you know, you bring up a really good point. A lot of these leaks, a lot of these concerns are coming from inside the White House. It has moved from a toxic work environment to a viral work environment. And I think the people there are not just concerned that I don't think this guy can do his job. They probably don't think he can protect them anymore. And that's where I think some of this leaking is coming from. People aren't just saying the bottom's coming out. They're like, this guy's not going to have my back when this all crumbles.
You know, Heidi, I think a lot about, and actually I want to show you first, Heidi, what the president said today about wanting to continue to put these types of folks that are closest to him, either the folks who work on Air Force One or in the residence or fly Marine One or the political staff. He wants to get back on the trail. Let's watch that.
I think I'm better when to a point where I'd love to do a rally tonight. I wanted to do one last night. But I think I'm better to a point that I feel better than I did, you know, I jokingly said 20 years ago. I feel perfect. There's nothing wrong. I had a case. I got it knocked out. I think it was Regeneron that was responsible for it. Because of that, it was sort of like almost a gift from heaven because of what I went through. And I had you know, I felt pretty lousy. A lot of people did.
Nothing in there. We combed that interview for any mention of wanting to protect the safety of the people that would be involved in, quote, doing a rally tonight. I wanted to do one last night. Nothing about what he's going to do to make sure that when he eventually gets out there, people are safe.
I mean, how many times have we been on your show, Nicole? We've talked about what it would take for the people who are in his inner circle, the people who are most loyal to him, to talk and to tell us what's actually going on inside this man's mind and inside the White House. Well, look, one of his good friends is dead, Herman Cain. We all know that there are people in the White House, at least one, who's very, very ill right now. We haven't heard from Chris Christie. He's hospitalized. People are dying. And that has to have an impact on a lot of these folks who report to him every day, regardless of how loyal they are to the man or to whatever the principles they are or philosophy that they think that he represents. That has got to have a big impact because it's not just them, it is their families. It is their at-risk grandmother who they may have been meeting with while they go into after they go into the White House and come out, or their children. Now it has huge potential impact. And the fact that they're not doing contact tracing, Nicole, is also something that you have to imagine those people would take personally, because this is a community-wide potential spread now of multiple layers that is going to hit that is hitting the White House and also the Senate. We have no idea how many people inside the Senate have been infected. There was the Rose Garden event, but Ron Johnson, clearly he wasn't there. He got it some other way. So it's affecting their health.
It is an unbelievable moment, and I'm so grateful to have all three of you to talk to about it. Bob Costa, Jason Johnson, Heidi Presbella, thank you so much for starting off this hour. When we return, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris